Okay, the meeting is live.
Great. It looks like we have enough people to call the meeting to order. Is that right?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So I would like to call the meeting to order and ask the recording secretary for roll call, please.
Chair Bailey,
Here.
Vice Chair Minor,
Here.
Member Smith,
Here.
Member Hennett,
Here.
Member Atkinson,
Present.
Member Holmes, Member Caston. Member Caston?
Here.
And okay, and did I hear Member Holmes?
I'm here.
Oh, okay, thank you. Let the order reflect that all subcommittee members are present.
Great, thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see the ones that I can see, and for the rest of you, I'm sure we'll see you in a bit. I'd like to remind the committee members to keep your audio on mute, please, unless you're actually speaking. The staff will remain muted until needing to speak, and as members of the public join the meeting, they will be able to participate as an attendee. Their microphone and camera will be muted. Only today's panelists will be viewed during the meeting. If you're calling in from a telephone and choose to speak during the public comments portion of today's agenda, for privacy concern, the host will be renaming your viewable phone number to resident and the last 4 digits of your phone number. And I'd like to ask the recording secretary to explain the public comments and how they will be heard today.
At each agenda item, the item is presented. The chair will ask for committee members' comments and then open it up for public comment. The host in Zoom will be lowering all hands until public comment is open for the agenda item. Once the chair has called for public comment, the chair will announce for the public to raise their hand if they wish to speak on the specific agenda item. If you are calling in to listen to the meeting audibly, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. The host will then call on the public who have raised their hands. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes and a timer will appear on the screen for the committee members and public to see. Once all live public comments have been heard, the meeting host will read emails submitted. If you provide a live public comment on an agenda item, but also submitted an email, your email comment will not be read during the meeting. Additionally, there is 1 public comment period on today's agenda to speak on non-agenda matters, which is item 2. This is the time when any person may address the committee on matters not listed on this agenda. Ellen, you are muted. Ellen, you are muted.
Thank you. I apologize. We are now taking public comments on item 2, which are non-agenda item matters. This is a time when any person may address the committee on matters not listed on this agenda. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. And host, will you let me know if anyone's there?
I see no hands raised and no comments were received.
Okay, great. Then let's continue to item 3, which is approval of the minutes. I'm hoping everyone had a chance to read the minutes from the last meeting, which was a special meeting that was on April 20th, 2022. And are there any changes to the minutes that are needed? Doesn't look like it. So we would need a member of the committee to please make a motion to approve the minutes as they stand.
I'll move to approve the minutes as they stand.
And
I second.
Okay. Did you get that? I wasn't sure who said both those things. Does the recording secretary get those names? And
Who was the second?
Yvette.
Oh, thank you, Yvette.
great. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we'll move on to scheduled items number 4.1. The fiscal year report 2021-22 Measure O annual report. And I believe we'll be having a presentation.
Good evening, Chair Bailey and members of the committee. My name is Jason Parrish. I'm the Administrative Services Officer for the Recreation and Parks Department, and here to start off the violence prevention section of the presentation. If you could please advance a slide. So this is a far more positive table than what we were reviewing a year ago. The beginning fund balance for 21-22 was a little bit over $500,000, which was all told was far greater than what we were initially expecting it. And with that and our programmed expenditures, we were just about in balance overall, leaving us over $450,000 in remaining fund balance. At this time last year, we were looking at totals that might have required over $250,000 in program reductions within the violence prevention section. But thankfully, counterintuitively, or maybe it is coming out of COVID, the sales tax really boosted the overall program. If you could advance the slide, please. And what you'll see here is the overall distribution of expenditures in 21-22 as we were coming out of COVID. The choice grants in this case represented over 40% of the total program expenditures, which the guidance that was developed after the adoption of Measure O was initially saying 35%. But what this represents is the additional grants that Magali will be talking about that have been put into the community to serve the nonprofits that work through the Choice Grant Program. So the second biggest expenditure is salaries. And within the violence prevention section, what that means is roughly 1/3 of these expenditures are for the regular positions supporting the violence prevention partnership. 1/3 of it is for the regular positions supporting the neighborhood services group that do the direct services in the community. And the remaining third are the temporary salaries for the just dozens and dozens of kids that we employ to provide the programs at the community centers and the neighborhood centers. So, and what you see on the administration line is the citywide cost allocation plan. So that's $56,000 that the violence prevention, both community engagement and neighborhood services, pay for things like human resources and information technology and finance and the city council, as well as the city manager and the city attorney. So that is the overall expenditures for a little bit over $2.3 million. And so I'll ask for the slide to be advanced, and I will be turning it over to Deputy Director of Recreation, Jeff. Oh, excuse me. One last slide. What this shows is the green is the expenditures, the blue are the revenues for this, and the difference between the two shows our ability to predict revenue on a year-to-year basis. So as you can see, in 14-15, we had a tremendous drop the following year, and it's taken us almost that long to recover from that revenue dip, but we have been able to accommodate with the overall programs changes to continue providing the high level of service, so that now, as you were able to see, the sales tax has continued to rise in a way that allows us to instead have a fund balance that will give the programs a little bit of strategic breathing room for delivery of services in the community. And so now I will turn it over to Jeff Tibbetts.
All right, thank you, Jason. And thank you, Citizens Oversight Committee. I will do my best. I know we've given you guys some updates throughout the year, so I will do my best not to repeat myself too much, and I will do my best to stay within the fiscal year. It's always so hard for me to stay on track with that because obviously programming wise, we're just out there doing things. So obviously this last fiscal year, the same story. We've been, all the updates to you have been talking a lot about COVID and the creativity of staff and how to get services back out there and how to be with the kids and do all those things. And fortunately this past year was some of the efforts of getting back to service model the way that we've done it before. And while I appreciate and commend the staff for all their creativity, the reality is we did things the way before COVID because they are more efficient. So as we can get back to doing it that way, that's a victory and definitely something to celebrate. So some of the examples of programs, the after school program model that we run having 6 Burbank housing sites. And we also ran the kindercare program, which I've spoken about in previous updates, where again, identifying what's going on in our community, being able to adapt. Again, staff did a great job with this program, realizing that right next to Steel Lane Community Center at Steel Lane Elementary School, the after-school program, school-based after-school program provider was not able to serve the kindergarten students that year during COVID, staffing shortages, all the rules that they were navigating. They just weren't able to provide that service. So our staff being as creative and outgoing as they were said, hey, we've got Steel Lane Community Center right here, right next door. We could walk over, we could pick up the kids, we can walk them over. And so again, just one of those huge programs to get those young kids into a program, a safe place after school, was very appreciated by the families, and one of the big success stories of this past year. So that's the after school model. There you see the total service hours, as you'll see on this sheet here. They're reported a couple of different ways. On that one, we've reported it weekly, and that's just the nature of how after school programs work, right? It's a whole school year program, 9-month programming. So the best way to capture it, we felt, was to show the weekly impact of those kids being in those programs consistently every day throughout the entire school year. The next area of programs that we grouped together there are the sports clinics, the dance, and the cheer. And again, these are programs I've talked about in the past of how staff had to be creative. And you have a cheer program, but now you don't have any sports leagues. So where do they go cheer, and flipping that program around and offering a dance program? Again, we couldn't offer the sports leagues, whether it was the rules of cohorts and those types of things, or just the delay in the schools opening back up to those types of programming and being able to use the gym. So starting new sports clinics and running that program through here. And again, you can see over 300 participants in those programs, which when you consider that all had to be reimagined as we went through the year, really quite an accomplishment for the staff to serve so many kids with these programs. And one of the things I really want to highlight with these programs, I know I've spoken about it in the past, it's something I'm very passionate about, is the work that our staff are doing out there with the kids. Yes, we're giving kids a safe place to be. We're giving them positive role models. We're working on self-esteem. We're trying to help close the academic gap. We're so many different things that are a part of the program that we're doing. That are neighborhood services goals, but as part of the bigger picture, as part of the violence prevention partnership, I think one of the key things that we do with the nature of the program we do is building relationships. And I think looking at that particular program area, there's a story to be told as I kind of jump into this current fiscal year, but we're starting to see the benefit of that relationship and what it really does for us. Sports clinics, dance and cheer programs that we're able to continue, we had no problems filling, right? There was that relationship. People knew about the programs. We had built trust. They signed up for them. Bringing back some of the sports leagues and stuff, we've struggled a little bit, but we were able to get back out there. But ironically, when we started a program like Junior Warriors, I think most people who work with youth know it's a lot harder to get those 11 and 12 and 13-year-olds than it is to get those 8, 9, 10-year-olds. So when we start programs, usually the younger groups are very successful right off the bat, and we build up as we build those relationships. And that's exactly what we saw, is the reverse of that, which showed the importance of those relationships. Our Junior Warriors program coming back, the older group filled first. And we were kind of scratching our heads saying, well, how did that happen? Well, that older group had been in Junior Warriors as younger kids. They'd been around for 3-4 years, so they knew the program. They were waiting for it to come back. They were looking for it. They were excited. The younger group didn't know the program. We had to go back out to the back to school nights and those different things to engage those families and send flyers out and do those things to engage the families of the younger kids to say, hey, here's a program, and get them in. And again, it's just a sign of the success that those programs are going to continue to have in the future, and the great work that the staff are doing out there. Not just with the kid who's in the program, but with the family and building those relationships and the trust. Moving on to the last group there, we've put together the summer and break camps. And again, one of the big accomplishments here is getting back to how we did services in the past. And one of the big things for us is partnering with the schools and using school campuses. So as we see a big increase in numbers there, 639 participants registered through that is the fall camp, winter camp, spring camp, and then the Recreation Sensation summer program. Over 105,000 total service hours. Again, we calculate that as a child for an hour as a service hour. part of the reason for that success is getting back out to the school campuses. And so using the break camps as an example with the, sorry, I'm looking at the report numbers. With the break camps, we had about 233 participants registered. If you look at our fall and our winter, we were serving about 60 kids per camp, and that's because we weren't able to use school campuses. And then being able to go back to Shepherd Elementary School as one of our sites for the spring camp, we were able to serve over 100 kids with that camp. Often using very similar types of resources, similar cost to Measure O and staffing and those types of things. But again, just the facility that we're at and what the facility can accommodate and the difference that makes is really instrumental in how many kids that we can serve. So it was a huge accomplishment for us to get back into the schools for that spring camp and get that model back up and running. And then we saw that success carry over with 381 participants scheduled for Recreation Sensation over the summer. And again, that's the success of being at those school sites: Helen Lehman Elementary School, Lincoln Elementary School, Meadowview Elementary School, and Roseland Creek Elementary School. And those numbers, honestly, as great as they were, are a little lower than we anticipate in future summers, because one of the school sites, there were some limitations with the amount of rooms that were available and some work that they were doing. So as we continue to get back in the schools and continue to build those relationships with the schools and identify those sites, that number from 380 can increase to 400, 420 students that we're serving every summer. So again, it might seem like a small thing, but it's really important and a big accomplishment this year to deal with the COVID protocols, to deal with new agreements with the schools based off of COVID and get insurances updated and check all those boxes to get back out to the schools. Because again, at the end of the day, it's not just where we're offering a program, it's 40, 60, 100 more kids that we're serving in these programs. And so it really does make a big difference and was a big accomplishment for the staff this year. With that, I will pass on to the next slide and pass on to Deputy Director Magali Tejas.
Thanks, Jeff. Magali Tejas here with the Violence Prevention Partnership. I wanted to give it a little recap for any community that are joining us, but to talk a little bit about our outreach. The outreach that the Violence Prevention Partnership has been doing has been specific to providing information about the Violence Prevention Partnership, about Measure O, the Choice Grant Program, and resources for local youth and families. We've had a number of events, and these events have included large-scale community events like Earth Day, Cinco de Mayo, Juneteenth. We've participated and been invited to many of these, and some of these we've hosted or co-hosted throughout the last fiscal year. We've attended community meetings, town halls, neighborhood-specific meetings and events, worked with our Choice Grantee events through the VPAS, our crisis response to schools and different presentations that we've been called to. So as you can see on your screen, in the last fiscal year, we attended or hosted or invited to 54 events, and we were able to outreach to almost 4,500 community members. One of those co-hosted events was Wildfire Ready, which was coordinated in partnership with the Santa Rosa Fire Department and the Communications and Intergovernmental Relations Office. We had a total of 25 community partners who participated, and there was a total of over 200 community members in attendance. Information was provided for individuals and families around preparedness, home and property preparedness, emergency alerts and notifications, evacuation zones, mental health, and other wellness resources around disaster preparedness for neighborhoods. Our crisis response team, we're continuing to respond to community acts of violence, and the crisis response team was activated, and we activated our protocols 3 times during the last fiscal year. This protocol activates police, the partnership, and other city departments as appropriate, along with community service organizations, social service agencies, and schools to respond promptly to acts of violence by providing guidance, resources, and engagement opportunities. The crisis response protocol aims to restore peace in the community and to assist family members, relatives, and those impacted by violent incidents. School outreach, the school outreach pilot program, also in response to acts of violence in the community and a gap in services for youth ages 13 to 15, the partnership created the school outreach pilot program, a 12-week life skills course, which offered participating student classes in anger management, conflict resolution, and exposure to various violence prevention strategies and activities. The pilot was implemented at Santa Rosa Middle School. An average of 6 youth participated in each weekly session. Each session followed a restorative circle format where youth were provided the opportunity to dialogue with one another about their feelings and experiences, as well as journal and engage in interactive activities centered around a weekly theme. The pilot was modeled after the aggression replacement training program and included wraparound services provided to all participating youth and their families. This program really was crucial and was born out of the sort of unprecedented rise in violence that we were seeing across middle schools in Santa Rosa, not just middle schools, but high schools. So this is a program that the team developed. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So with funding leveraged by the Sonoma County Probation Department, the partnership continued implementation of the Guiding People Successfully program. Many of you had already met our wonderful coordinator for that program, Irma Cuevas. The GPS program provides critical funding for system level improvements to the partnership's referral system, while also supporting evidence-informed prevention and intervention programs, including services such as case management, in-home counseling, work readiness training, and paid work experience. Since its inception in January of 2015, 376 youth have been enrolled in GPS. For the fiscal year 2021-2022, this accounted for 48 non-probationary youth and 12 youth on probation, totaling 60 youth. This is an overall, increase of 23% in total youth referred, both probationary and non-probationary. There was also a 40% increase in the number of non-probationary youth referred. And one of the reasons for this increase in numbers is the creation of the Green Spaces for All Faces program to close the gap in services and to take a proactive approach to support youth participating in the GPS program. The partnership created Green Spaces for All Faces in partnership with Sonoma County Probation and Sonoma County Regional Parks. The goal of Green Spaces for All Faces is to provide a space for high school age youth to participate in pro-social activities off campus in an outdoor setting, accessing the health benefits of being outdoors, to earn community service hours and learn more about local parks and Violence Prevention Partnership services, of course. Since the program launched in March of 2022, a total of 51 youth have participated. If we could go to the next slide, please. So with our Choice Cycle 10 year 2, we continued working with our 10 grantees, implementing programs under the partnership's 4 pillars, which are school readiness, student engagement, truancy prevention, street outreach and mediation, and workforce development. This picture here is of our youth working with Conservation Corps North Bay with their core members. And we've continued to use our results-based accountability, so the RBA framework. All community partners use specific performance measures to evaluate their impact. And at the close of each choice cycle, we ask ourselves, how much did we do? How well did we do it? Is anyone better off? The County of Sonoma's Human Services Department Planning, Research, Evaluation, and Engagement, also known as PRE, unit was engaged by the partnership to provide evaluation and scorecard development services. So PRE, or also known as Upstream Investment, their staff provided training and technical assistance to the partnership staff and Cycle 10 choice grantees on the Clear Impact Scorecard. This included development and the launch of the Santa Rosa Violence Prevention Clear Impact Scorecard database. We provided input on how to access the scorecard, how to enter the data, development of choice program indicators and performance measures, as well as the development and performance measures for each participating choice grantee. All participating grantees began entering their own data into the Clear Impact Scorecard in the fall of 2021. And moving forward, staff will be training all future grantees, including the current cycle 11 grantees, on how to enter this data. Unfortunately, the evaluation of choice cycle 10 year 2 was not completed due to the departure of the violence prevention program manager in mid 2021 and multiple unexpected leaves of absence from key program staff. While data was entered into the Clear Impact Scorecard, a full analysis was not conducted. And recently, the partnership staff were in a current process of procuring and onboarding an evaluator to assist with these services moving forward. A quick update on the choice mini grants. This program was suspended due to COVID-19 and also our staffing shortages, but we are trying to get it back in the queue to be able to offer that hopefully not too long from now. So next slide, please. And that is the end. Any questions, comments?
Golly, it's Ellen. Hi, thank you. And it just sounds like, well, everyone appreciate the reports. It's just been exciting to see things come back, right? And I really am impressed with how, new things that you've created, especially the green spaces for all faces. I think that's a really important one for that age group, particularly. They're struggling with social interaction at this point, and being outdoors helps. I'm assuming that because you had that these kids, we had more referrals because you had more contact with different organizations that were helping them to connect up with these services. So that's really fabulous. So thank you for that. I had one question here, and I have to put my glasses on so I can see what it was. Oh, I know. You said that the scorecard, I know the scorecard's planning out. Is that going to be this fall that's going to be coming out, or has that been delayed again because of the staff issues you've been having?
Well, we are hoping to be able to align that with our new program manager, and hoping that we'll be able to put the program manager position in at least by the beginning of next year, is what seems to be pretty feasible. And so having that new staff person really outline a vision in terms of, what the scorecard could look like now post everything we learned in 2020.
Gotcha. So, so you're looking at putting, hopefully in January, recruiting as a program manager. I bet that would be nice for you. You've been running at least two positions as far as that I know of. So that'll be a relief. Okay, thank you. And does anybody else have questions?
Vice Chair Minor was next.
One suggestion going forward, because I've been taking extensive notes, is that when we have each section, like neighborhood services, violence prevention, if we could stop for questions. And so I've been jotting down my questions, but I don't want to forget by going through everybody and then going back. So could we make that change going forward? So I'm going back to neighborhood services, and this is going to be a question for not only neighborhood services, but violence prevention. I want to find out, is there anything in place where there's an exit survey for the kids that have been in these programs before? Because what we're finding is that kids' interests are changing, like Jeff said. And so I wanted to find out, are we going back and talking to the kids to find out what do they want to see in the programming? Because what worked last year may not work this year. So is there anything in place like that, Jeff? And then also Magali?
So there is, and it has fluctuated through the different years. And it's certainly one of the aspects with the reporting that's my goal within those programs that are offered through recreation. And as the report card gets reestablished, is to really hold our programs at that same standard of doing that same reporting as any of the choice grant agencies. So there is information done that's kind of been program specific, but to, I think, the point of your question, there's definitely more to do with it, more information to gather, to celebrate successes, to find areas for improvement. So we'll definitely be evaluating that within the neighborhood services programs and come with more standards, whether that's again lined up with the new report card format, or, just surveying that we do amongst, again, our program area.
And same question, Magali.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because we actually are implementing that now, especially since we're doing our results-based accountability. And we have been doing that in our needs assessment, but I can tell you, for example, with our school, with our pilot program, we did do a pre and post assessment. So we were able to gather information after the program in terms of, if I could just give you some real quick items here. So 50% of the students that reported reported that they knew who to contact for support before participating in the pilot. After the pilot program, 83% of the students reported they knew who to contact for support. So, the program was working, the wraparound service portion of it was working. And so we are going to be looking very deeply into how to better, tell the story of the effectiveness of these programs. So yes, thank you.
And then one more question. This is back to Jeff. I know we have surges going on as far as COVID and flu and RSV. And so with the upcoming programming, are there any kind of protocols that are going into place to make sure that we, keep our little kiddos safe? Or is it just every man for himself?
So yeah, I mean, unfortunately, our new reality, right? We say we're gonna get back to normal, and I think the reality is realizing that's a new normal, and so I think the difference is we're much more equipped to handle that now. We've learned so much over the last years. We've implemented so many things. So while there has not been mandates and we have not had to implement anything specific at this point, I think, one, we hire a lot of staff out of these programs, first jobs a lot of times, so a lot of young staff. So you're talking about people that this is kind of what they've grown up with. And so I think our greatest resource is them, and the fact that this isn't just like how do we run this program or something? It's kind of become a way of life, and they're very good at it. And I think everyone, we continue to remind parents, not that, habits that we probably should have always been in even before the pandemic. If you're not feeling well, stay home, do some of those things. So a lot of things have just changed in the way that we offer programs. Agreements with schools are a little bit different now. And so if the schools implement certain procedures, then we know with our use agreements, we're going to have to implement similar procedures with how we operate programming. So there's a lot of balances and checks. And again, it's a constant evaluation of what's going on with programs. And I don't remember the last time, but we have still recently done some cohort shutdowns when we're like, oh, wait a second, something's happening here. So it's, again, continued communication with the parents, knowing what's going on, reminders, and those things. We through the summer program, we were able to provide a lot of tests to families because we got a test provided through a grant that helped us, identify and deal with those things. So there's constantly things going on. We're constantly addressing it and monitoring it and evaluating what new procedures should be, what old procedures we should go back to, and juggling with all of that.
Okay, thank you so much. And I do appreciate the hours that is put on for each activity, how much hours is being spent to that. That helps me to capture, how much time and effort is being put into that. So well done. Thank you.
No, definitely look to evaluate the results and surveys and feedback from participants more, and have that included with the next one as well.
Member Caston.
Thank you. So Deputy Director Tibbetts, I just want to make sure I'm reading these numbers right. For Parks and Rec, there's 4 FTE, and that's the recreation supervisor, the 2 recreation coordinators, the recreation specialist, and an equivalent of 10 FTE, and those are the youth that are employed within your programs?
Correct. Those are the budgeted positions within the Measure O program. There is the neighborhood services in the general fund, which does provide another 2 positions and roughly the same amount of temporary services.
And do we leverage other funding sources besides the general fund and Measure O? Are there grants or anything else that comes in as a part of these programs?
We do. Jeff can tell you extensively about our Change for Kids program, which is a kind of a partner program with this.
Yeah, so Change for Kids is a roundup of utility bills. That is money that comes in and supports these programs as well. The biggest matching fund that we have is that as that contract continues to grow is with Burbank Housing. And so those after school programs, really the Measure O contribution to those programs are our permanent staff. For the most part, there's a lot of details to the contract, number of sites and different things, but for the most part, those are cost recovery in terms of money received from Burbank Housing to pay the staffing that are at the site and everything. So it's more the oversight that Measure O supporting. So that's definitely the best cost, matching fund example that we have. And as other things come up, we'll certainly look into. I mean, that's differed over the years. At one point, when we were doing after school programs more school based, that was a huge matching fund, was grants received from the school district. So that's changed over the years, but right now it's primarily the Change for Kids and the Burbank Housing Agreement.
With the Burbank Housing Agreement, do we see that continuing its current size or growing over the, in the future?
So right now it's probably at its roughly capacity. And again, it's I think there's some opportunity with Burbank Housing to grow, but it's not funding the oversight, the permanent positions that are the ones, hiring the staff at the sites and developing curriculum and working with organizations to bring in STEM programming and planning field trips and all that other work that goes into it. Although we do have a limited term position that we've funded for a couple of years. And so for the next couple of years, as we evaluate, again, right now, it's really tricky. We're looking at bringing back Junior Giants baseball. We receive not funds from Junior Giants organization, but a ton of supplies and everything where we can offer that program very cheap. So we're bringing back a lot of stuff. We really want to try to bring back our middle school soccer program that's been gone for a few years because we know that age needs services, and that was such a efficient model of serving a lot of kids of that age. So balancing that with workloads with this limited term position, will that allow us for a couple of years to increase with Burbank Housing. And fortunately, we have a great relationship with them where we really can constantly evaluate and go back and forth. One of the sites we started for this current fiscal year, we went out there for about the first month, and there just wasn't the need that both parties thought there would be more need there. And so we reassessed and we decided to move that location to another Burbank Housing site, and that site's done very well with registration. So it's a great relationship that we're able to constantly, obviously we go through contract periods and that whole mess of the legalities and everything, but fortunately at the bottom end, when it gets to getting the work done, it's a great relationship that both parties are really interested in serving the families and doing whatever we can. So it changes a lot. I think right now we're kind of maxed out where we are, but as we evaluate programs coming back and stuff, there could be some potential for growth.
Excellent. Thank you. Last question for you is, as we're hopefully looking for this transition to Measure H, what can the public expect? Is it going to be consistent with what we've been doing, or are there changes on the horizon should H this next week?
And so being a little bit new, I want to see, I don't know, I believe the city attorney was going to be jumping on, and I just want to see what I'm in a staff role allowed to answer regarding that question or not, and just want to make sure, is the city attorney able to make the meeting?
Yes, one moment. Let me unmute her.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, good afternoon. Yes, I am here. I did miss the question, so if I could get the question repeated, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. The question was, programmatically, should H pass, what would the public expect if there's any differences, or if it would be very similar to what's happened under O?
I am going to have to turn up my sound. I could not hear you clearly.
I'm sorry.
So let me see what I can do here. Okay. Can we try again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So just programmatically, because there are language differences between the two measures, would
Yep.
there be any, what can the public expect during a transition time, should H pass?
Once H passes and is in effect, that new language will apply. So that expands the areas. That expands the uses, permissible uses of Measure O. That includes for the mental health response services, some extensions of prioritization into Roseland and Southwest Santa Rosa, and a couple of other things.
So for
It's-
the purposes of Parks and Recs, the programs that are happening would be continuing?
Yes, there'll be no interruption in services. The measure extends it for an additional 20 years after 2024. So it remains in effect, but those changes into the allowable uses take place immediately. So, but all of the existing programs can continue. There's no change in the measure that would eliminate or reduce any of the existing programs.
And Sue or Magali or myself able to expand on, strategy towards programming pending the outcome of the measure?
I'm also perfectly happy to have a conversation after next week.
Okay.
Magali, I do have questions for you on this report. So if for the, let me get back to that page. For the GPS program, you referenced that I think it's 48 in the report, but 51 youth from probation have been engaged through it. What's that total population that are available to be served through probation in the city? So is it 48 or 51 youth out of how many?
That is a great question, and I want to get you an exact number. So if it's okay, I can come back with that information. But I don't want to give you a wrong number.
Yeah. And I guess what's our intent for growing that? Because it seems like a really good transition program. So is the intent to kind of grow to where the population or resources, cap, or how is that conversation with the probation department evolving?
Yeah, the probation department has been incredibly supportive. They love working with Irma and her vision of getting youth outdoors and also bringing in various partners, so other partner agencies, because we are limited in our staffing. What we've really benefited from is bringing other nonprofits who are serving the population, bringing them in, assisting. They're assisting with resources. So because as of now, that GPS position is just funded by probation. It was on a year-to-year, but now we're on a 3-year. We're going to be taking it to council, I should say, to be put in for us to be able to hire and have Irma, the coordinator position on 3-year contracts versus year-to-year. But I guess having said that, we are working on allocating a budget to be able to grow that program as much as is feasible, given the staff capacity that we have, and then given the position can leverage other partners to help us.
What's the measurements for success here? Like, how are we tracking with this population? What makes this program successful?
That is a great question. And I know that Irma is working on, what are the indicators that she's going to be using as we really kind of lock in the formula for the program, how she wants to navigate this, because we haven't really been, it hasn't been ongoing long enough. So we do want to make sure that we're intentional, but we want that we want the end goal to be that youth and their families can enjoy this outdoor space, can enjoy doing a pro-social activity, with family, with our agencies, and also ultimately get connected to the various choice agencies that also give us service, give our youth and family services through the choice grants.
Thank you. I just want to say I'm really happy to hear throughout both parts of this first part of the presentation, the ability to leverage these funds to bring in other funds from other agencies. I think it's was such a great use and good stewardship of funding, and yeah, so thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, or shall we move on to fire?
I think Mansa had his name raised or hand raised. I just don't see him on my screen. Is his
Yeah,
hand?
it looks like he lowered it.
He lowered it. Okay, great. I just had one quick question for Magali. Magali, I think Jason mentioned it, that there was a 5% increase in the money that was given to grantees this year. Normally it's a 35% of the budget, and it was 40% this time. Can you tell us about that?
Jason, do you want to?
That has actually more to do with the overall cash flow during the second half of dealing with COVID. And so typically we will budget for the 35% as it goes in, but especially during 21, 22, because of the nonprofits themselves, as well as with some of the turnover in staff, just making sure we have the granting process continuing to go smoothly. And so we ended up having a 40% of what our total expenditures are.
Do you expect that to happen again?
I would expect that to be more of a cash flow blip.
Okay.
And to be more particular to 21, 22. But we'll have to see. With the fund balance being far better than we were expecting it to, it means Jeff and Magali will be able to look at, like I mentioned, more of their strategic visions and what they can do to help move those forward.
Okay, thank you. Then it looks like we need to move on to the next presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Bailey and members of the committee. Scott Westrope, Fire Chief of the City of Santa Rosa. Next slide, please. We have the next slide, please. Thank you. So I'll go over the budget and the operational side of Measure O. Hopefully this is the last time you have to hear me get through the budget portion. We finally hired a finance analyst who started about a month ago. And I didn't think it was fair to have Sarah go through this early on in her tenure here, but you'll be hearing from her in the future. So you just got to tolerate me for one more presentation. So looking at the high level overview of Measure O, our beginning fund balance started at about $3.3 million. As you can see, the revenues totaled about 4.6, which is a little bit higher than we had expected. And then expenditures were about 4.1 million. The $665,000 encumbrance that you see there is for the Motorola mobile radios and mobile repeater sites that this committee approved last year. Those are in our possession and they're being installed, but it still shows as an encumbrance. So at the end of the day, we're left with about a $3.1 million reserve fund balance for the fire department. Next slide, please. A little bit more detailed look at our expenditures over fiscal year 21-22. About $3.5 million of the Measure O fund went towards salaries and benefits, or about 86%, which is very much in line with what we look like across all of our funds. We're about 86% salaries and benefits. And then we had a service and supply line of about $114,000 and administrative costs of $112,000. And then the $367,000 lease payment on Station 5, which comes out of the fund annually. Next slide, please. This is just looking at the revenues and expenditure lines over the course of the entire measure. I'm going back to fiscal year 05-06. And you can see in last fiscal year, there was an increase in the revenue line. It's really picked back up since the dip in 2019-2020. And you can see our expenditures remain pretty much static, but it's below the revenue line, which is a good thing. Next slide, please. Talking about our positions that are tied to Measure O, we have 10.25 FTE assigned to Measure O. We have 3 fire captain paramedics, 1 fire captain who's assigned to our training division, 3 fire engineer paramedics, 3 firefighter paramedics, and then 25% of our EMS or emergency medical services division chief's time is paid for Measure O. And it also provides the incentive pay for 6 paramedics that are assigned to our 2 truck companies. Next slide, please. The impacts of Measure O for the fire department since inception is it's provided 9 firefighters and a training captain. It supplied 3 engines and 2 trucks, or a total of 5 units as paramedic or advanced life support equipped and staffed. It's enhanced our emergency medical services management through partial funding of our division chief. And as I said before, that's about 65% of what we do on a daily basis. So it's very important that we have that oversight and management in place. It's improved our response times dramatically with our deployment of resources throughout the city, which reduces fire loss and improves EMS patient outcomes and increases community outreach. And then, as we know, and we'll talk about in the upcoming slides, it's financed the construction of Fire Station 5. Next slide, please. So for the fire stations that Measure O built, Fire Station 10, where I'm located now, was constructed in 2008. Fire Station 11 on Lewis Road in the JC District was opened in 2009. And then, as we know, Fire Station 5, which was opened in 2016 and we lost during the tubs, was also funded via Measure O. Next slide, please. As far as the equipment added, we have the 2 Type 1 fire engines that were purchased via Measure O. 1 Type 3 fire engine, which is used in the wildland environment, was purchased with Measure O. 4 of our command vehicles, our Swift Water Rescue trailer, and then most recently in this fiscal year, we purchased 55 mobile radios and 8 mobile repeaters that was approved by this committee. Those are on site and being installed on our apparatus and our vehicles as we speak. So a great enhancement to our communications capabilities throughout the city, both on and off incidents. So really appreciated to the committee for that. It's a huge enhancement to our organization. So with that is our last slide, and I will turn it over to the committee for any questions you may have.
Go ahead, Manta.
I was just going to say, Manta, would you like to have a...
Yeah, thank you for your service to the community. Just have one question for you. You mentioned that you lease, we lease one of the buildings. Is that where that $367,000 is going to?
Yeah, so Fire Station 5, which was on Newgate Court, was purchased via lease. And so that was the financing mechanism to build that fire station. And we continue to make those payments and will until June of 2025, we'll continue to make those payments.
Okay. So we are looking to purchase the building. We're not. Okay.
We're looking to pay off. We're looking to pay off the lease. Essentially, we have terms of a lease that we have to pay off, and so I just had a discussion with finance about this today, and so we continue to make those payments. But essentially, yeah, we have to meet the terms of our agreement, and even though we lost that fire station, we continue to make those payments until its term is expired in June of 2025.
And we've built 2 fire stations from Measure O funding.
Built 3.
3.
3.
Those are not under a lease.
The first 2 were not. The third one, Station 5, was built under a lease.
Oh, okay.
So the other two are completed and outright. Station 5 is the only one we continue to make a lease payment on.
All right. Thank you.
You bet.
Nick Caston, do you have a question or comment?
Just a quick question on the fire stations. How much money going into the reserve each year is for future fire station construction?
It's a great question. Thank you. So essentially all of the funds that are going into the reserve fund right now are towards fire stations. And as we've talked about before, in 2004, when the tax measure was passed, $3 million was plenty to build a fire station at the time. We built those 3 other stations for less than that. Unfortunately, construction costs have far outpaced the revenue of the tax measure. So while we're not saving up enough on an annual basis to build a fire station per se, right now our target is about $15 million to build a fire station. What it does do, it allows us to go out and do things like buy property. So for instance, the new fire station 8 property was purchased with partial Measure, actually it wasn't Measure O funds, it was through CFF funds. But we have that ability to partially build fire stations or to finance them or whatever the case may be. So all of the money that goes in the reserve fund, the intent is to save up enough to build a fire station. We're not going to see that with the current pace of the revenue. However, it does open up the opportunities to help us build stations and help us purchase property. So there certainly still is a huge benefit to the infrastructure with Measure O.
And as you're looking at cobbling together the funding for the future fire stations, can you just discuss kind of the strategy and benefit for service of what you're looking at in the future?
Sure, absolutely. So we have a couple documents that we use, all written by third-party entities. The first one's a strategic plan. The second one is deployment analysis, and the third one's a staffing plan. All of these plans are the roadmap that we use to figure out where we're going to build fire stations and how they're going to strategically impact the community to the best of our ability. So essentially what we look at more than anything is response times, and there's 2 different factors to the response times. Number one is our day-to-day response time for emergency medical aids or the first due unit to a structure or vegetation fire. The second number we look at is what it takes to get an entire complement of firefighting resources there via NFPA 1710 to the scene. So for us, that's 3 engines, a ladder truck, and a battalion chief. So we look at really those 2 times, the first due and the full complement or the full ensemble arrival. And that's what we really base all of our strategy on building fire stations on, is that. And then we couple it with, obviously, with future growth and potential growth and looking at where we need to put fire stations to better serve the community. And with the infill and growth we're seeing now, I wouldn't be surprised that our next strategic plan and deployment analysis shows that we need to build more than the current 2, move to and build 2 new fire stations we have on our list. So I think we're going to need to grow even more, but we'll have that coming out in the next year or so.
And this briefly for, I believe, it's Station 8 that's going in on Hearn. Can you just talk about how innovative that combined funding with the library project is? I think it's really important to see how we're bringing additional dollars into the community with Measure O.
Yeah, so for those who haven't heard about this, what we've done is we were able to purchase 6 acres of property at Hearn and Dutton. For the fire department, what that showed was that's where we needed to build a fire station to replace the current Station 8 on Burbank Avenue. But it was such a large property, we looked at different partnership opportunities and how we can turn that area into something very useful for the community. For a fire station, we only need about 1 acre. And so it opened up a lot of conversations. And so with the library district looking to build a new fire station in the Southwest, we immediately looked to partner with them. And so it started out, it was going to be a fire station and a library combination. We really thought this was a great asset to the community. It really tied into a lot of the work we're doing as far as our recruitment and diversity plan. And then it's really expanded from there. And now we're looking at things like a cultural center and park space and pools and things like that. So there's a very deep process being run by the Office of Community Engagement right now to look at what the community wants out of that space. But there's funding opportunities there, but more importantly, there's a community benefit there that we're really excited about in the future. And I really hope that this type of space is the future model for how we build civic space in the future in Santa Rosa and beyond, quite frankly.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chief.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands, but I wanted to say to Chief, that sounds really exciting. I hadn't heard about that. That's really wonderful. Thank you for asking the question, Nick, so that we could hear about it. That's I'll be really interested to see how it all turns out. You know, there's always this long process, but there's such a need in that community, and they've been wanting special spaces there for a long time. So kudos to you for being creative. Thank you.
Thank you. It's definitely a team effort, but I appreciate it.
Mhm. Does anyone else have a hand raised and I just don't see them on my screen? It doesn't look like it, so let's move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Bailey and committee members. I'm John Cregan, the Chief of Police here for the Police Department. And I'm going to partner this presentation with our Administrative Services Officer, Pam Laurent. So I'll have her, Pam can, if we go to the next slide, and Pam will start off with the financial part of our presentation.
Great, thanks, Chief. Good afternoon, everybody. As Chief said, I'll go over the financial slides and then hand it over to him to follow up. So this slide shows our beginning fund balance of $958,000. We had a higher than expected revenues of $4.6 million. Then a small fair loss revenue of $27,000, and our expenditures were $3.6 million. We had reduced those expenditures in anticipation of a lower revenue, but I'm happy to report that was not the case. So that leaves our ending fund balance at $1.9 million. Next slide, please. This just breaks down our expenditures by category. As you can see, the majority of our expenses are for our salaries and benefits for our 16 staff members. That makes up about 93% of our overall budget. Then we spent about $210,000 on services and supplies. This covers our downtown enforcement team office, our lease for that station, maintenance on our vehicles. We have 3 motorcycles funded with Measure O and 3 SUVs patrol officers use. And we also pay for the fuel for those vehicles, as well as some insurance costs. Then we spend $112 on general fund administration, which is just the overhead for the city. Next slide, please. This graph shows our overall revenue and expenditures since the beginning of Measure O funding. As you can see on this last year, or I'm sorry, as you can see over time, we've been trending upward on our expenditures. This is due mostly to staff increased costs. This last year, it dipped down slightly because we reduced our expenses by cutting the 3 police officer positions in anticipation of reduced revenues. Next slide, please. Chief?
And I'll take it over here. Thank you, Pam, so much. So as Pam outlined, with 93% of our budget from Measure O going toward these full-time employee positions with salary and benefits, and it breaks down to 16 employees here at the police department, and 11 of those are sworn positions in our police officer rank, and those are broken down to a police lieutenant, which is a mid-level manager, and that lieutenant is for traffic, special events, and some of our downtown enforcement services and teams. We have 1 sergeant, and that sergeant is a first-line supervisor in charge of our motorcycle traffic officers and our accident investigator and DUI officers. And then we have 9 different police officers, and 5 of those are assigned to enhance our patrol services. 2 of those are assigned specifically with our downtown enforcement team, and 2 of them are assigned to our traffic division as motorcycle officers, and that makes up the total of 9 officers. Then we have 5 of our 16 positions are for our civilian or non-sworn employees, and we have 2 of those as field and evidence technicians. And this team plays a very critical role, and they go out to all of our major crime scenes, process the crime scenes, gather the evidence, gather DNA evidence, blood evidence, photographs, and ensure that we're able to have fair trials that proceed for any defendant arrested here in a Santa Rosa case. We also have 1 community service officer, and this community service officer works for taking collision reports, non-injury collision reports, no suspect burglary reports, and parking citations, and other administrative duties here with the police department. 1 communication dispatch supervisor. So we have a team of 24 dispatchers, and so this supervisor is one of our team of supervisors that helps with some of the 911 calls that are coming in, and this team and dispatch handles many traumatic incidents in our city involving some of the shootings, the wildfires, earthquakes, whatever it may be. For this supervision is really critical to our dispatch team. And then one police technician, and this is an individual who works in our records division and is works in our front lobby when community members come in for assistance, whether it be getting reports or getting advice, and they take some no suspect information reports that are able to handle right there in the front counter or lobby, and also administer our automatic report writing system where people can turn in reports and do online reporting, and the police technicians manage that. And the addition of this police technician allowed us, now that we're back up to full staff in our records division, to go back to Saturday service, which we had lost due to some staffing shortages. Next slide, please. So here are some of the things talking about what we're doing with those 16 funded positions directly from Measure O. First is enhancing those patrol services, and that's those 5 additional officers in patrol. Those officers are helping us with some of our rising crime that we're seeing here in the city of Santa Rosa. We'll talk about in some of the future slides. They help with our wildfire evacuation planning that we have and help with so many other areas. And we also talked about the 2 additionals we have in our downtown enforcement team and with our traffic motor team. And this has been a busy year for our traffic team. We've had 7 fatal collisions in our year so far this year, and we had 5 fatal collisions last year. So it's an important part of our services. That dedicated lieutenant that's directly out of Measure O oversees some of the special events, and we have some large ones here in the city of Santa Rosa, like the Country Summer event at the fairgrounds, obviously our county fair that comes every year, the Wednesday night market, and that's just one of the many events they're having downtown at Courthouse Square and our fairgrounds and other establishments throughout our city. This lieutenant also oversees our incident management team, and that team plays a key role in these major events and on some of the emergencies, whether it be the wildfires, earthquakes, floods. So we have our own department operations center here at the police department that our incident management team operates out of, and they're directly supervised by this Measure O lieutenant. And he plays a key part right now, Lieutenant Josh Gledke, who's in that position with our citywide homeless response, and works with Kelly Kuykendall and Megan Bassinger and others from our community and housing services with the city. Also, our team here with some of the enhancements in our patrol continue to work with our critical partners at the Violence Prevention Partnership. And we have officers who attend both the monthly operational meeting, and then we have some of our command staff members and myself who attend the every other month the policy team meetings. And we're working more regularly with the crisis response team that Magali Tea has talked about, and we continue to be able to integrate with our team to work with some of the upstream approaches with some of the prevention and intervention, so we can help divert some of our youth and our adults from ever being introduced to the criminal justice system in the first place. We talked about the expanded hours and records, and we also, some of the things that our dispatch supervisor helps us to do is to manage a tactical dispatch team. And this is a team that's able to respond out in the field with a tactical dispatch team or a mobile dispatch team for some of the critical incidents that we may face here in our city. Next slide, please. So some of the other things that we're continuing to look at for the future of Measure O and what we're seeing, we launched in January 11th of this year with a partnership with the Santa Rosa Fire Department, our In Response mental health support team. And this is a team that's built with our associate licensed mental health clinician, a single role fire paramedic, and a homeless outreach specialist, backed by an incredible team of system navigators who help support and provide mental health acute intervention in our community. We're also working towards some of the increased community engagement events. And that's some of the feedback we've received from our community Oversight Committee in the past, is about being more involved. And we're really proud this year for this Measure O fiscal year to be able to hold an 8-week community police experience. We held a youth police experience, and we're really looking toward other things, whether it be coffee with a cop, whether it be some of the other programs, National Night Out, and so many of the dozens of programs that our officers were able to work with our city's community engagement team and really get out there in the community and start making some of the connections with those in our community who want to build more trust with our local law enforcement. And we're proud of the work we're able to do this year in that. We've seen some of the expansion of our downtown enforcement team. And one of the things that we're able to start last year with our special enforcement team, which is really working towards some of the things with the taking some of these illegal ghost guns and helping reduce some of the violence in our street, helping us with the sideshows that we're having. And none of these teams would be possible if it wasn't for the support of Measure O to be able to reduce some of the violence, the sideshows, and taking some of these illegal guns off the streets of Santa Rosa. Next slide, please. So this talks about for in the fiscal year for this Measure O is some of the things that we've seen here. We saw in 2020 4 reported homicides, and 3 of those related to a firearm. In 2021, 6 homicides, and 4 of those were related to a homicide, and we're seeing that continue to progress. So far in this year, in 2022, we've had 10 homicides in the city of Santa Rosa, and 6 of those involved a firearm. So it's something that we're continuing to see the need to put resources in to reduce some of this violence in our community. We're also seeing a significant uptick with some of the illegal guns seized in the streets of Santa Rosa. And you see right here in 2021 of 170 firearms seized off the streets of Santa Rosa, and 44 of those were ghost guns. And we've seen that go up dramatically in the first 9 months here of 2022 is the data that I have so far. Next slide, please. For looking back at a glance at some of the calls for service about what we're putting these Measure O dollars and these 16 officers and positions in the police department or what they're doing, we saw over 241 calls come into our 911 dispatch center for the calendar year of 2021. And out of those, over 109,000 times an officer actually responded to one of those calls and contacted a community member in the field. Another thing that we talked about here with Measure O Oversight is our priority 1 response times. And that's something that we watch very carefully. Our goal is to have the priority 1 response times under 6 minutes. And that's when someone calls 911 for an emergency occurring, and we want to have an officer respond there in under 6 minutes. For last year, we saw it at just over 7 minutes, at 7 minutes and 3 seconds was our average response time to priority 1 calls. We've seen that slowly creep up, and currently right now we're seeing it at 7 minutes and 7 seconds. That's where it's averaging currently. So that's something that we're continuing to monitor, but I feel very confident that these Measure O officers are helping to reduce that with having more officers available to go to these calls for service, help reducing some of the violence on our street, and are going to be a critical part in bringing that number down to a more manageable number at 6 minutes. Next slide, please. So we went through that information very quickly, but we really wanted to save the time to hear any questions from our committee members. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Vice Chair Yvette.
So I have a question in regards to Gang Awareness Week. If Magali or you can remind me what happened during that week, because I can't quite remember what was some of the activities from that.
Yes, and we are working with this new, are you talking about the last cycle? So cycle 10, which just passed. Some of those were kind of postponed and or they were modified because of sheltering in place. But I'm happy to send over a list of how the agencies kind of made the pivot and provided that resource either through a drive-through event or something online.
Yeah, I would like to see those. Sure. And then my next question is in regards to this response time. In the report itself, you have the priority 1 calls, but in this one, you go over the priority 2 calls and priority 3. And so do we have numbers for the previous years? So when the report is done, I would like to see this additional information added to that, because now you're saying that Measure O funding helped with that process. So we have the current numbers, but we don't know what the previous numbers look like. So we need to see if there's an increase or decrease, and then kind of find out why is that happening. And so in response to that average time 7:07, is it because what's causing that number to fluctuate? If you have a response.
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure I'm clear. So in the actual Measure O report, it lists in 2021, we saw the 7 minute, 3 seconds to priority 1 calls. In 2020, it was 6 minutes, 44. And then in 2019, it was 6:48. So that's the progression over those 3 years. that I have. Were you looking for additional years past the 2019?
Well, no, the additional for priority 2 calls and priority 3 on the
Okay.
slide, you have that on the slide that you're presenting to us, but in the report itself, that is not in there. And so if there's Measure O funding that is being utilized for that, I think that's something that should be put in the report as well, so that we can monitor if it's increasing, decreasing, and then try to figure out why is that happening. And I know it has to do with, loss of, officers and so forth, but there could be some other reason that, or something else that can be done to fix that with the Measure O funding.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And so the priority 1 calls are the emergency 911s. What the priority 2 would be someone like a theft that just occurred or middle of the ground. And then the priority 3 would be like a parking complaint in those, but we could make sure that we incorporate it also. It shows the full picture on all.
Right. And especially if that's money coming from Measure O, because I do hear from the community as a whole, well, I call the officers and they never come. So that's a commentary that we do hear out in the community. So then why is that? And then what is it that could be done, maybe possibly out of the Measure O funds that can help alleviate that number? And so it's something that we should really, take a look at, considering we're right now on the precipice of determining if we're going to have, Measure 8 going forward. So this is something that would be new services to the community as a whole. So that's something that should be put in the report.
Great. That's valuable feedback. We'll make sure we include that next year.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any more hands raised. Does that mean we have no more questions or comments?
I have a couple questions. Chief, can you, for the 2021 at a glance slides related to the crime, mostly increases, some decreases, can you put that in the context of, are these national state trends or are these localized trends?
Yeah, so these numbers specifically are talking about the city of Santa Rosa, but when you compare it to national trends, we're seeing across the United States. So this isn't just a phenomenon here in Santa Rosa. We're seeing some of the violent crimes and we're seeing shooting offenses going up. So it isn't a Santa Rosa issue. It's a California certainly issue, but across the nation. So it's something that we're examining some of the causes, and there's not one thing that's causing it. And we're seeing one of the biggest trends that I'm seeing is specifically here in California is access to these ghost guns. And these are ghost guns, or the unserialized, like 3D printed polymer guns that are very accessible in the streets throughout California right now. And I think that has one of the biggest causes of seeing a rise in violence, seeing a rise in some of these things, is access to these firearms. And we're working with our state legislators and we're working with our enforcement. And that's another key part of working with community, our violence prevention partnership, about doing parental and student education classes. So those are some of the things that we're doing to hopefully start seeing an increase in that. And so far this year, we're proud to see that we are seeing an increase in firearms seized off the streets of Santa Rosa, and we're starting to slowly see a decrease in some of the shootings reported in the city of Santa Rosa. So I think collectively the work between the partnership and the police department is making a difference.
Thank you. The ending fund balance of 1.9 million, this may be a question for Ms. Lawrence. Is that because of unfilled positions that had been budgeted?
So that's mostly due to the increased revenue. We had held the and reduced the expenses last year in anticipation that the revenue would be decreased. And then we cut the 3 police officer positions last year, making our overall expenses less. So that did increase our fund balance by a lot more than expected. We do have plans for that funding. I don't know if Chief Cregan wants to address that a little bit more. We would like to build out a Roseland substation, ideally, with this funding.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been some of the strong community feedback we received about having more of a police presence in Roseland and more of a community engagement arm in there. So we're actively right now working with our city realtor, looking for space in Sebastopol in the heart of Roseland to open a police substation, have in a perfect world, we're going to have Spanish speaking staff there in a public facing lobby where individuals could come in, be able to file reports. And also we can have more police resources that stay in the Rosen community instead of coming all the way to the Santa Rosa main station on Sonoma Avenue. So we're actively working for that. And that's what we plan to use these funds for. And we had talked about before too, about using funds that are going to go into, we'll be the first in Sonoma County with the full Axon fleet program, that all of our marked vehicles will have cameras in them, both forward-facing cameras and in the rear passenger area. So anyone who's transporting a police vehicle. So those are things that are really important for the accountability, for transparency, and for liability. So those are things that we're excited, and that's what some of these funds are going to be coming. But the Rosen substation is in our goal, and ultimately my goal is to be in one by July of 2023, but it's dependent upon us finding a building that meets our needs and fits within our budget.
Excellent. I think that goal is would be a very tangible delivery on the commitment that we made when we annexed Roseland, and is incredibly important to following through on that. Going back to the response times, can you just talk about the impact of open positions, recruitment, and where we're at, and how that may help affect the response times going forward?
That certainly plays a key part. And we spent right now, we were for several months at 21 police officer vacancies. We just hired 3, so we're at 18 sworn vacancies right now, but we're seeing some progress, and we're seeing some strong investment with our recruitment team and some of the things we're doing. We're hoping to send 10 police officer trainees to the upcoming academy in January and be able to slash those vacancies, and already working on a next academy class in April. So I think that help is on the way, but there has been impacts of being down 21 police officer positions in the city of Santa Rosa, and it's been impactful on our staff. And quite honestly, I'm proud of our police officers and our civilian staff members who are quite frankly doing a lot more with less right now, and going to more calls and not having off time as much off between those calls. And so they're really doing everything they can, but there's certainly been an impact on our streets.
Excellent. Thank you for the information, Chief.
Thank you.
I don't see any more hands raised. If anyone has a question, now's your chance. Okay, so then I think what we need to do is go to the public. Do we have any of the public listening in at the moment?
It doesn't appear so.
Okay, so we would take public comment if there were public people here to ask that, but since we don't, let's move on to what we need to do, which is to make a motion. I'd like someone to make a motion that to approve the annual report.
I'll move to approve the annual report.
And we need a second.
Second.
Thank you. So it is approved, and it looks like then our meeting is, we've accomplished what we were here to do. So I think the meeting I can call the meeting to an end. Thank you, everyone, the staff. I know all the work that you're doing to prepare for these meetings, as well as the work you do every day. So thank you for that. And thank you to the committee for the hard work that you do to make sure that the public trusts what we do with the money. And I look forward to seeing you again soon, and fingers and toes are crossed that we pass Measure H. I'm probably not supposed to say that, so Sue, tell me if I need to be quiet, but if you haven't voted, please vote, and encourage your friends to do the same. And thank you very much. We'll see you again sometime in the near future. Stay well.